Coming up on Network Africa. Police in Madagascar say they've arrested suspects who may have plotted to kill the president. "17 migrants drowned in a shipwreck off the coast of Tunisia." Plus, the African Union Task Force on Vaccine Acquisition says the continent will start receiving 400 million doses of Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine from next week. Thanks for joining us today on the program. I'm Joke Rogers. Police in Madagascar say they have in their custody 6 people, including 1 foreign citizen, suspected of plotting to kill the country's president following what officials say was a months-long investigation. Madagascar is well known to have a history of political violence. The current president, Andry Rajoelina, was once a coup leader who was sworn in as president in 2019 after a hard-fought election and a constitutional court challenge from his rival. Officials are not revealing details of the investigation or when the suspects were apprehended. The information about the foreign citizen was offered by the Attorney General, who also did not give any more details. A separate statement by the public minister says 6 people were arrested, 1 foreign citizen, 2 dual nationals, and 3 Madagascans. Here in Western Africa, Mali's government says it has opened an investigation into the attempted knife attack on interim leader Assimi Goïta inside a mosque during the Eid al-Adha festivities this week. Prosecutor Borama Kariba Konate said an inquiry has been opened to shed light on this event. Colonel Goïta had said that he was doing very well and downplayed the significance of the assault. Police made arrests at the Grand Mosque where the leader was attending the Muslim ceremony when animals are slaughtered to celebrate Prophet Ibrahim's sacrifice. Colonel Goïta has led 2 coups in less than a year, the first one being in August 2020, which ousted President Ibrahim Keïta. The second coup was in May 2021 when the interim leader Ba Ndo was also ousted. To illegal migration now, as more than 200 migrants are said to have crossed into Spain's North African enclave of Melilla early this morning, climbing the high fence that separates it from Morocco. A statement from local authorities say more than 300 migrants attempted to scale the 6-meter fence using hooks. The 238 who made it through were all men. 3 police officers were slightly injured. Melilla and Ceuta, a second Spanish enclave also on Africa's Mediterranean coast, are popular crossing points for African migrants seeking to enter Europe illegally. Around 8,000 people swam into Ceuta or clambered over the border fence in May after Moroccan authorities appeared to loosen controls for a couple of days, prompting Spain to deploy troops and extra police. Official data on migratory flows to Ceuta and Melilla were still being updated after the surge in illegal crossings in May, while overall numbers intercepted crossing into Spain rose about 57.5% to 13,483 as of the end of June. Meanwhile, Turkey is accusing Greece of returning 15 migrants sailing towards the Greek islands to Turkish territorial waters. A video released by the Turkish Defense Ministry showed that what it said was a Greek Coast Guard vessel in the Aegean pushing the migrants back towards Turkey. The migrants were in Greek waters at the time of the incident, and the video was shot on July the 19th. A Turkish Defense Ministry tweet said that the migrants were rescued by Turkish Coast Guard. Turkey has repeatedly accused Greek border authorities of violating human rights by abusing and harassing migrant boats in the Aegean area. Athens strongly denies that it carries out illegal pushbacks of migrant boats entering its waters from Turkey. And a real tragedy off the coast of Tunisia as at least 17 migrants drowned in a shipwreck while attempting to cross the Mediterranean to reach Europe from Libya. The Red Crescent says more than 160 other people were rescued by the Tunisian Coast Guard and that the boat had set off from the Libyan port of Zuwara, carrying migrants from several countries. Many of those who died were from Bangladesh. Joining us now on the program is a professor of African History, Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of Ibadan, Professor Isaac Olawale Albert. He's currently in Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Right, so I remember it was, back in 2015 when the migration into Europe from Africa started. Since then, the numbers have dipped. But every now and then, we hear of scores of people still making the dangerous journey or trying to make the dangerous journey across the Mediterranean. Why is it so hard to dissuade people from going to Europe, or at least in this manner?
Well, in considering a matter of this nature, you take into consideration the push and pull factors. And the push factors have to do with the things driving our young people out of Africa. And then the pull factor are the attractive facilities in Europe or any other part of the world that these young people are going into. There is deep crisis of development in Africa, and the crises are getting deeper. We are not doing well economically, we are not doing well politically, and recently you have upsurge of youth violence, youth protest across the continent. And it's like African leaders are not sufficiently responding to these cues. Now, I think the problems in that part of the world became compounded when Gaddafi was killed in October 2011. Before then, we had sprinkles of young people trying to get to the southern parts of Europe, riding rickety boats and trying to squeeze themselves across the borders. But since Gaddafi died, we've not been able to get any African system that will really curb this irregular migration. And therefore, on an annual basis, you find young people actually losing their lives in the Mediterranean. I looked at the data recently, and I discovered that last year, in 2020, the first 6 months of 2020, 513 young people died in the Mediterranean. Now, it is that figure has doubled this year. Since January to this period, we have lost 1,146 young people have died in the Mediterranean. Then the question you ask yourself is, why are more and more young Africa choosing to die in the Mediterranean? A few years ago, we did a project at the City State University of New York, CUNY, on this project. And we interviewed a young man that was trying to cross from Morocco to Southern Europe. And he was reminded that he could die in the process of the voyage. Then he cited a verse of the Bible that asked a good Christian to choose between life and death. To him, staying in Africa will result in death. Crossing the Mediterranean is a 50-50 chance. And he said he chose life. And that life is 50-50 chance of crossing the Mediterranean into economic El Dorado in Europe. But I was in Italy. I interacted with some of these people that successfully crossed the Mediterranean. They are suffering. Many of them sleep by the seaside. Many of them sleep at motor parks. Many of them sleep at public parks. And the women among them go into prostitution. I saw a lot of this. I went around Italy and I saw this. So I think the solution is for African leaders to get more responsible. You know, people are, you know, countries of Europe are doing something about it. But the question we want to ask ourselves is, what are African leaders doing about it? People are fleeing, they are fleeing different African countries, and the political leaders are more interested in future elections. They don't care for the young ones. There is no investment on youth education. There is no investment on, you know, on the young ones who are said to be future leaders. No investment on them. And I think this is what is driving them away from Africa.
In your submission there, you spoke about African leaders being responsible. We do know that most of the problems that African countries are dealing with is bad governance, insecurity, conflict, the reasons why people are leaving. So finish your thought on that. What do you think these countries need to do to overcome these challenges, to restore people's faith in their governments and, of course, the economy, so that the young people, as you say, can stay back and help develop, the economies the more?
Well, there are several youth-centered academic projects being done across the African continent. Now, these projects are trying to understand what problems the young ones in Africa are facing. And what you find in most of these projects is a case of abandonment of the young ones. We did a project in South Africa many years ago, and the young people we work with in South Africa told us that after the death of Madiba, after the death of Nelson Mandela, that they were going to take South Africa. Unfortunately, when they started this project, they started attacking fellow Africans, what you call Afrophobia. But now, when you see the kind of violence that we are witnessing in Africa now, in South Africa now, these young ones are taking, they are destroying their society. In Nigeria here, we saw NSAS. So the problem we are facing basically is that the current pack and set of African leaders are not investing on the young ones. And these young ones are unhappy. If they are not causing problems, that is not to say they are happy. They are not happy with their older generation. And I mean, you move around Africa, you find leaders, the so-called leaders of youth movement in political parties. You know, some of them are as old as 65, 70. They are youth leaders. Some of them are almost in their graves. They are still leading. So, at what stage are we actually going to transfer power to these young ones? And until we begin to do that, I actually don't see things getting better for us in Africa. In fact, the future is more endangered because the young ones in the continent are frustrated. Just 2 days ago, I read a report that terrorists are aggressively recruiting in Ghana. I mean, the whole of Sahel is in trouble. The young ones are the kind holders of many of the problems. They are jobless, they go to school, they don't have jobs. Their political leaders are not investing in their education. Their teachers are abandoned. Their parents are unable to meet their parental obligations to their children. So we have a deep youth crisis across the African continent. Now, all these young ones that are running away across the Sahara and that are swimming across the Mediterranean are just saying, okay, let us abandon your continent for you. And those who have decided not to leave are into career criminality. Cultism, you find armed robbery, all kinds of problems. Some of them go into terrorist organizations and they are better paid than even their peers that are working. So African leaders have to look inward and deal more concretely with this problem. African Union has to live up to its expectations of helping to save this continent. We're in a deep crisis, but our leaders are so selfish, they are more interested in things having to do with them and their children, and they are abandoning the larger society. And I think this is what is responsible for what we're witnessing now. Last year, 513 died. This year, the first 6 months last year, 513 died. The first 6 months this year, 1,146 died. So by next year, we're going to have thousands, 3,000, 4,000 people actually, losing their lives in the process of trying to swim across the Mediterranean to Southern Europe.
Right. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that, Professor Albert. Thank you for your time on Network
Thank you so
Africa.
much for inviting me.
Still to come on the program. The impact of rock climbing on the people of Senegal. Welcome back to the program. Huge crowds are gathering in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, at the Meskel Square to demonstrate in support of the army. The National Army has clashed with fighters loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front for months. Those supporting the army are blaming the TPLF for the conflict. The conflict is spreading to neighboring states and humanitarian aid has not reached civilians. More people are fleeing Tigray and neighboring regions. And says humanitarian stocks are rapidly depleting in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Deputy spokesperson for the Secretary General Farhan Haq says entry into the region has been difficult, thus preventing food stocks, fuel, and other humanitarian goods from reaching the people. He says NGOs and UN agencies are running out of cash and are unable to pay staff for all the suppliers.
Turning to Ethiopia, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that while there are improvements in access within Tigray, the last entry point open to get into the region, the road between Afar and Tigray via Samara city, remains blocked due to security reasons. This prevents humanitarian personnel, food stocks, fuel, and other humanitarian goods from entering. The UN Humanitarian Air Service's first regular flight is scheduled to begin tomorrow, the 22nd of July. Meanwhile, humanitarian stocks are rapidly depleting inside Tigray. As of this past Monday, WFP and partners only had enough food to feed about 1.9 million people for one round of its common food basket. Despite challenges, at least 167,000 people were reached with food and nutrition support last week. Shortages of fuel and cash, as well as communications blackouts, are significantly hindering the resumption of the humanitarian response and preventing its scale-up. NGOs and UN agencies are running out of cash and are unable to pay staff or suppliers. Unless fuel, cash, supplies, and aid workers are able to enter Tigray in the coming days, some humanitarian programs will not be able to function.
The African Union Special Envoy on COVID says Africa is battling a severe third wave of COVID-19 infections and will start to receive the first batch of 400 million doses of vaccines from Johnson & Johnson next week. Only about 60 million doses have been administered among a total population of 1.3 billion so far on the 55-nation continent. J&J doses will be used to immunize half of the estimated 800 million people in need of the vaccine on the continent. The Strive Masiwa, who is also coordinator of the AU Task Force on Vaccine Acquisition, made these announcements today. Around 6 million doses will be delivered to 27 nations that have paid their share through the end of August. Another 18 finalizing loans from the World Bank and other global lenders before they make payment.
The African Union has purchased 400 million doses. 220 million has been paid for. 180 million is an option we trigger in September if the orders have come in. I'm pleased to say that African countries have ordered and placed pre-orders in excess of 400 million doses. We prefer that they license producers in Africa rather than to produce under contract, because we want to be treated the same way as they produce in India. Okay? If they can produce under license in India, they should be able to produce under license in Africa.
And we're now in Senegal, where rock climbing falls behind wrestling, football, and surfing, as well loved pastimes in the country, but it has bound together a small community of locals and expatriates who say that their sport is under threat. The issue, coastal erosion caused by a massive construction boom in the capital, Dakar, where luxury hotels and condos are being built close to a once untouched shoreline, eating away at the land and eroding the well-worn climbing routes. We follow a crew of Senegalese climbers who are still fascinated by this sport.
Dangling from Umber Cliffs that tower over Africa's westmost shoreline, a crew of Senegalese climbers hunt for footholds that they say are vanishing. Rock climbing has bound together this small community of locals, and many say the sport is under threat. Bits of hard cliff are quickly turning into slopes of scree. Footholds and places to latch a rope are being lost.
It's kind of sad due to the fact that it's really a place where you can get all the stress from Dakar, all the noises and everything. When you come over here, it's quiet, you get the nature around, and if things are getting built all over the place, well, that is definitely not going to be positive for the nature as well.
Senegalese people, they like stuff.
Waiting at the summit after each climb is no longer a clean park, with a pleasant view of Dakar's lighthouse that for 150 years has kept ships away from the reef below. These days is a dusty construction site littered with medical waste from a nearby hospital.
When we think about this small scene of climbers, let's say Senegalese climbers that are really starting to get involved into this beautiful sport, and at the same time we have the construction going on, which will automatically kind of restrict us from climbing, it's very, very, very sad. I mean, this is a beautiful spot to climb, and the opportunity also for Senegalese climbers to be seen also on the international scene is definitely not going to happen if we don't have access to this climbing spot.
Erosion costs Senegal's government more than $537 million per year, especially due to loss of high-value urban land, according to a 2019 World Bank study. That's more than double what Benin loses, despite its having the region's worst coastal erosion in terms of land volume lost. This geologist, who heads Senegal's National Scientific Research Institute, worries that if something isn't done, and soon too, the cliffs and the lighthouse may crumble into the sea.
Et les mamelles aussi, c'est le vestige, c'est ce qui reste comme histoire du volcan des mamelles.
Mamelles cliffs are what remains. The volcanic history of Mamelles is geological history of Senegal, so to protect it is already very urgent. Because if we don't, in a few years' time, the lighthouse will fall. You see all the rocks behind us? The lighthouse is not far behind. So we need to protect Mamelles urgently because it's historical, touristic, ecological, and strategic.
Look at this, how amazing it is to be able to be here with our friends, to enjoy every time here. But I think we are happy to be here, and it would be very precious to give it better than we find it to our children. And this is my main goal, to protect this area for the coming generation.
But some magic remains. One recent evening, climbers found an injured hawk nestled into the cliffside. Unable to fly, they took the bird in, and 2 weeks later, it's flying again in the skies.
That's Network Africa. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.